Nuclear war, the final conflict between nations as we head into the darkness of collapse. Whether brought on by directed geopolitical instability, the growing scarcity of non-renewable resources, collapse of the international economic system, or even the increasing and accelerating pressures of climate change, it's all the same end. It doesn't really matter why it is happening, it only matters that such a thing is the inevitable result of the destabilization we see all around us. It will be all of those things and more that take us to the brink of nuclear annihilation and then past it. This year, the so-called doomsday clock that since 1947 has stood as an indicator of how close the world is to that fiery end, was moved back to its shortest time remaining ever. It is now only 89 seconds to midnight. Look around you. Look at the world. Look at what is playing out right now in global politics. Tensions are high, conflicts are raging, and others are about to erupt. Right now, the world is closer than ever before to the final world war of our current age that results in the previously unthinkable, nuclear escalation. We know it's coming, that much is clear, but when, and how will it start? Most importantly, which areas will be targeted directly and how can we prepare for that? Those are the questions we're going to answer today, and I'm going to provide you with all the tools available to do your own personalized nuclear threat assessment for the target area that you may live in or nearby. Our focus today will be on a new report that was just recently issued by the Federation of American Scientists. It represents the most recent and thoroughly updated understanding of nuclear targeting doctrines since the days of the Cold War. All right, we haven't had anything for quite a while. This is a massively important update and long overdue, and it details modern strategies for targeting for all of the world's currently nuclear-armed states. It's a must-have for any collapse prepper. So let's talk about it. Stick around, I'll tell you where to get it and how to use it. Welcome to the wasteland, my friends. Hey everyone, this is Chris and you are watching Wasteland by Wednesday. On this channel we discuss emergency preparedness, prepping, and our focus is on the imminent collapse of global civilization, why it's happening, and what you can do to better prepare yourself and your family to try and survive it. Now today we're diving briefly back into one of the darker and more important topics that collapse preppers need to understand, and that is nuclear war. All right, I've got a more in-depth video on the subject, which I'll go ahead and link up here. There's also a series of articles available on my website, wastelandbywednesday.com. There's also a resource database there to help you do your own nuclear war threat assessment for you and your area. I'll go ahead and link that in the description below as well. But in this video, I specifically want to discuss a new update to all that, okay? Specifically an update to our understanding of the targeting strategies used by the various nuclear-armed states in the world today. This is the actual report, which we'll be going over a little bit. I'm also going to link that below for you. But more specifically, we're also going to talk about why governments don't really want you to know about this stuff that much and why you need to anyway. So let's get to it. Over the past decade, nuclear-armed nations have been beefing up their arsenals in ways that make it feel like a Cold War sequel, or maybe a precursor to the hot war that we can all see brewing on the horizon. Russia's revamping its nuclear launch systems and talking openly about normalizing the use of tactical nuclear weapons. China is expanding fast and building an arsenal capable of matching the West, and of course the US and NATO are countering with their own enhancements. We're watching a dangerous chess game play out on the world stage right now, and it's not just posturing. Behind closed doors, military leaders and defense contractors, government politicians, all those, they're the ones that are planning who gets hit, how hard, and with what. All right, but the public, we're not really invited to that. All right, not even a little bit. Governments keep this stuff secret on purpose, and it isn't to protect us, it's to kind of protect society as a whole, sort of. They're more concerned with that than they are the individual. It's mostly about maintaining control, all right? If the average citizen knew what was really going down and understood it deeply, there might be more of a panic out there, and a mass panic really doesn't fit well into the government's war plans. Now, here's the problem, okay? Even though we're the ones that would end up suffering the fallout, literally, we don't really have an idea of what's on the targeting lists, okay? Not the general public anyway. Not even most lawmakers. Some of the people involved in giving those orders don't even know what's about to happen. All right, that's pretty dangerous when you think about it. See, if you know a little bit about military doctrine, geopolitics, and nuclear technology, you can start making educated guesses about this stuff, and you can think about who's aiming at what. All right, and that's exactly the kind of thinking that governments want to discourage. Informed people might actually start preparing, all right, and taking actions, or even worse, questioning policy, right? We can't have that. They don't want you thinking about systems like Russia's perimeter dead hand trigger system, all right? They don't want you remembering that there's tactical nukes out there capable of being fired from normal artillery pieces, literally just nuclear artillery shells, all right? And some of the artillery pieces that can fire those things are deployed on the front lines in Ukraine right now, all right? Technically, they're supposed to be gone, but we know the Russians don't throw anything away, okay? They don't want you going over any of that. They definitely don't want you thinking about things like, they don't want you wondering whether mutually assured destruction is still a thing or not, because spoiler alert, it isn't, and it never really was, okay? So the result of all that, well, we got a world full of people right now who don't even know whether or not they live inside or right next to a nuclear target area, all right? Or they don't even know how to begin preparing for that reality. We see mistakes being made all the time with people talking about, oh, I'm going to move to Montana or, Wyoming, and that's where I'm going to prepare for doomsday, all right? And I mean, those are really fantastic areas to go for privacy and just to live off grid, okay, to have a nice life and all that. But a nuclear war of any kind, that's the last place you want to be, all right? Those states represent America's nuclear sponge, they call it, all right? Go Google that one too. Those are 100% guaranteed to be the hardest hit areas in the United States if a nuclear war kicks off. They'll be the first hit and the hardest hit. We're talking ground strikes here, not airbursts. All right, this is because that's where the vast majority of the U.S. missile fields are located. All right, there's 3 main spots. You'll be able to see them on the maps, but choosing a spot that's close to one of those states, it's really a misguided thing, okay? And that's because people don't understand where these missiles are going to be going when they're fired. Few people are even aware of those things at all, okay? Have you ever looked at a map of what happens, what the radioactive fallout looks like from strikes on those missile fields? If you haven't, take a quick peek. In a worst-case scenario, almost all of Montana and North Dakota, as well as parts of Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Kansas, those would receive a dose more than 10 times what is considered lethal. That's going to result in deaths in a matter of days. Most of the Midwest would receive a lethal dose almost immediately, while elsewhere would see deaths occur in weeks. This isn't a matter of opinion or possibility or something. This is a statement of fact, okay? The studies and data, all that stuff's listed out on the resource page of my website, which I've linked. But why do so many people choose to go to these places then and try to retreat there? It's simply because they don't know the risks. They don't understand. They don't know where the nuclear targets are, and that's a huge gap in their prepping. And the problems go even deeper than that, okay? Not only do most people not understand nuclear war scenarios, but we've got lawmakers and national leaders that are voting to make changes to things like our nuclear weapons modernization, and they don't even understand where those weapons would be targeted, what they're going to hit. They don't know any of that stuff, okay? Everyone everywhere just kind of assumes that nukes are some abstract Cold War threat until they're not. And the internet doesn't help, okay? You got folks out there that are just laughing off the Russian nuclear capabilities as being broken or whatever, and
Apparently, they've not been paying attention to the fact that for the longest time, it was Russia who was keeping the International Space Station supplied after our shuttle program stopped. Trust me, the Russians might suck ass at a lot of things, but they know how to build and maintain rockets, okay? Then you've got people in the U.S. who are pretending that, even if such orders went out, oh, they wouldn't be followed. That's just outright fantasy, okay? The orders absolutely will be followed, and there's contingencies in place to guarantee it. Thinking stuff like that, it just shows that a lot of people lack the understanding of what the procedures are for things like that. You know what I mean? There's fail-safes all along the way to make sure those orders are carried out without fail, all right? That's something that we have to acknowledge as being a truthful thing. The nuclear threat isn't something that we should just laugh off or downplay, all right? And it certainly isn't something that you want to be uninformed about as a collapse prepper. This is why a big part of collapse awareness means understanding nuclear strategy, okay? Whether it's economics or climate change or resource scarcity or, even the threat represented by AI. Whatever it is that starts to build on our collapse, all roads eventually lead to conflict between nations, okay? And in this modern age, conflict between nations will be a nuclear conflict in the end. There's just no way around that. It's a historical fact, all right? Going back as far as we have history, there has never, ever been a nation or a people that has just surrendered to defeat and assimilation by a conquering enemy without first using every single weapon at its disposal to prevent that. Every single weapon, all right? You think Hitler wouldn't have used them? If he had them in those last few months when, Allied forces are closing in and Germany's being overrun and the upper leadership, they're all facing certain death, right? You really think that they would have balked at using nuclear weapons after everything else they did? You think that's where they would draw the line? I don't think so. They would have used them. And, Russia, China, hell, even France, they would do the same damn thing, all right? That's just how it works. So look, when it comes to nuclear doctrines and strategies, we don't really have to know every little detail, okay? But we do need a working knowledge of how targeting works, all right? Especially concepts like counterforce, countervalue, and the nuclear sponge theory we already talked about. Once you grasp stuff like that, you can start making educated guesses about which cities, bases, or infrastructure might be most at risk. And you can look at global tensions, Ukraine, Taiwan, Iran. You can gauge escalation windows. That's how you get ahead of this thing. Once the missiles fly, you're not going to have time to be thinking about all that stuff. You'll be watching it happen in real time. Now, as I said, I put together that collection of resources and a toolkit on my website. There's also the walkthrough video that I'll be linking, but today I want to highlight that new report. All right, the report itself, it's called Planning for the Unthinkable, the Targeting Strategies of Nuclear Armed States. And it was published by the Federation of American Scientists just in June, I believe at the end of June, 2025. It basically lays out everything we know and don't know about the different countries and how they approach nuclear targeting. All right, it covers doctrines, delivery systems, new technologies, and even what recent global events mean for strategies. It's not a classified dossier, obviously, but it's the most comprehensive, openly available resource that we've had for this in years. I've added it to my site. I highly recommend you read it and work it into your planning. I've changed a few of my own targeting maps, which are on my site, based on the new information reflected in this report. And as resources go, this is a really good one, okay? For example, China's a much bigger rising threat now than they were at the tail end of the last Cold War. All right, they've basically, they're emerging as the new focus for our opposition axis with Russia, Iran, and a few other members of the BRICS alliance. Back when the older assessments were done and older targeting data was out, China really wasn't much of a player, all right? But they certainly are now, and we got to pay attention to that. In just a few years' time, their very modern nuclear stockpiles will begin to rival those of the West, and nuclear proliferation is just going to grow across the world as these problems become more severe. We have to think ahead to future conflicts in order to figure out our preps for today. The report itself is available on my website as well as at fas.org. The contents show a very clear breakdown with a comprehensive introduction to general nuclear doctrine and targeting fundamentals. After that, it goes on to examine each other nuclear-armed state on the list in detail, with specific attention paid to updating previously relevant information to account for recent changes. This first section is critical to understand when it comes to the basic fundamentals of nuclear war and targeting strategies. Once you have a grasp of these concepts, you'll be better able to decipher for yourself the meanings behind world events such as changes to nuclear doctrine as they are announced, or even emerging technologies and how they can affect the general strategies. These fundamentals are important to be familiar with because otherwise you're at the mercy of whatever the media tells you when there are changes afoot, such as the recent doctrinal changes announced by Russia. You need to be able to interpret such actions independent of any outside source, and that means you need to be able to understand what the hell they're talking about. All right? Following this, the rest of the report focuses on the individual nations that possess nuclear weapons, leading with the primary pair that still accounts for the bulk of all weapons, the United States and Russia. Following those, we move on to the rising dragon of China, and that is where you'll have to start putting on your objective thinking cap. China is not that much of a nuclear power just yet, but that is what the Russian half of that alliance is providing to back up China's quickly growing conventional forces. These are things you'll have to consider when evaluating the nuclear targeting strategies of the smaller force nations, okay? Because it's rarely only about what their goals are. Often it's more about where their patron nations tell them to jump and how high. For example, Russia may possess a much larger and incredibly diverse stockpile of nuclear weapons than China does, but I think we can all see who's the bigger dog there right now. Following into India and Pakistan, we have another traditional pair of enemies, ones who recently had a little troubling dust-up of their own. Now, neither of these could be considered the most stable of nations, and yet between them they have enough nuclear weaponry to seriously change the global situation ecologically forever, even if they only engaged in a limited nuclear war with each other. And on it goes. All right. For those of you out there who already kind of know your stuff from the days of the Cold War, this is still a very valuable update to that. All right. And for those of you who have no clue what the hell I'm talking about, this is a great place to begin your education into nuclear warfare. And once you do learn a thing or two, you'll start to realize that things are a lot more precarious than what you may have previously believed. All right, it's one thing to be told how bad things are by me or by some other prepper or someone on YouTube or the media or whatever, but it's an entirely different thing to come to that realization yourself based on your own knowledge. And that's what I want you to be able to do. And that's why I'm introducing you to stuff like this. Look, here's the uncomfortable truth in a nutshell. All right, nuclear war isn't just possible, it's becoming more probable the further we move down that path to collapse. All right, and whatever path we're on, whether it's economic instability or resource scarcity or climate chaos or failed diplomacy, whatever it is, it all flows to the same outcome eventually. All right, and that's conflict. Conflict leads to nuclear war. We're watching the old world crack apart right now, piece by piece, all right? And when the pressure finally releases, it's going to do it in fire. The best thing we can do right now is stop pretending that it won't happen and start preparing like it already is. So read the report, okay? Use the tools, make your plans, because the world isn't getting any more stable and time isn't on our side anymore. Till next time, guys, stay safe and stay ready. It's a wasteland out there.